I am Heather Gray. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and certified bioenergetic practitioner. And we're going to get a little bit into my background on why I am so passionate about why we stop focusing on treatment and how to actually overcome Lyme disease, mold toxicity, and autoimmune issues for good. I've found that when we focus too much on treatment, right, there are very huge missing pieces to the health puzzle that so many, well-meaning practitioners are leaving out. And through my own personal journey of 27 years of undiagnosed Lyme disease, 3 autoimmune diseases, and we'll get deeper into that. But it wasn't until I implemented these steps that I'm going to tell you that I actually was able to put a lot of this stuff into remission for the past 3 years. So, and like I said, the mold thing wouldn't have happened if I would have stood up for myself and been my own health advocate, which is what I advocate, which I say to do all the time. And I was it made me laugh that I didn't follow through with my own instructions, but that won't happen again because I really like having my brain and I love how it works these days outside of mold. So anywho, what are you folks excited to learn about today? Why does this topic, why are you here today? Type that in the chat. Let me know on, what you hope to get out of this and what you're excited about learning. Anybody? Cool. Natural ways to heal, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of pain, overcoming Lyme without antibiotics. That's huge, right? We've been told that that's the only way, and I'm here to say there's another way. All right, 5 little known factors that could affect the success to your Lyme treatment. I already said all that. Over the next 40 minutes, I will give you a little background on myself and why I do what I do, and then I'll get into some tools and some awesome research that I learned to help give hope to those who are struggling with things like Lyme, all the side effects that come with it, being depressed, anxiety, being reactive, moody, chronic widespread pain, brain fog, and so much more. I'll also share with you how we work together if you choose to go deeper in this healing journey. How does that sound? Are you ready for this? I found this work after 27 years, like I said, of being undiagnosed Lyme disease, celiac disease, Hashimoto's, endometriosis. I was depressed, anxious, chronic widespread pain, bad skin, bloated, weight gain, horrible periods, just to name a few things. Back in 2013, I set on a path to healing. I have now lost over 100 pounds. My pain has lessened. No more suicidal thoughts. I'll tell you more about that later. And I have energy all day. I'm proud to say that I help people destroy brain fog, moodiness, chronic inflammation, and pain. Let's see if I remember how to move the slide. Yay! I was basically born full of shit. I remember being very constipated at a very early age. 4 years old, sitting on the potty for so long, my feet were dangling, they would fall asleep, right? And that was kind of the beginning of doctors throwing Band-Aids at symptoms. They were throwing thick, nasty oils down my throat, stool softeners, but nobody was trying to figure out why this 4-year-old was so constipated. How many of you can relate to having issues of constipation, right? You don't need to raise your hand, just not, actually, no, hardly nobody has their cameras on. I was going to say just nod, but it's no fun, right? I was working with a gal who was having issues of constipation, and it killed me because she didn't realize that not having a bowel movement daily was not a normal thing. She would go 3, 4, 5 days sometimes without having a bowel movement. Now she has 2 a day like a champ, and she's feeling so much better and less toxic. All around this same time, my uncle had committed suicide when I was 4 years old. He parked his car in a garage, shut the door, and left the car running. I was really close to him as a kid, and being 18, or he was very young. He was 17, 18 years old. So he was kind of like a big kid himself. And being raised by a bunch of alcoholic addicts, there was a lot of chaos in the house to begin with. And he was somebody that I could just feel, someone who got me. And when he left, it left a huge hole in my life. And with the other adults not being able to hold space for their own emotions, let alone teaching this 4-year-old how to handle her emotions around this, I think it really kicked off my autoimmune disease, the celiac. I was eating a typical standard American diet at the time, didn't know any better. And that's where a lot of the autoimmune and the constipation came from. I myself have had 2 failed suicide attempts. My son has had a few as well. Mental illness is definitely something I am predisposed to. I definitely could have been a statistic. Growing up poor, neglected, verbally abused, I never thought I would amount to much. I definitely could have been a statistic. I was a high-risk teenager who had a perfect storm of unresolved trauma issues in my genetics, poor lifestyle choices. My nervous system was a wreck. My gut was a mess. So when I got bit by a tick when I was 13, I was the perfect host for Lyme disease. And a lot of people go, huh? Yes, perfect host, right? Because if you think about it, if it was just that simple, a tick bites you and you get Lyme disease, not only do you not just get it from ticks, there's so many other ways to get Lyme disease. We'll go more into that later, but everybody would have it, right? So it is definitely the right condition, the right host, the right terrain to have these things happen in our life. And with all that stuff that I had talked about before, I definitely set myself up for that perfect storm so that when I was bit by a tick, like I said, I developed Lyme. How many of you with autoimmune issues and Lyme also have a history of early childhood trauma, right? The research that shows people who have a higher ACE score or adverse childhood experiences are more likely to develop health issues and autoimmune issues later in life. I used to be a lot like some of your clients, or you maybe even a lot like yourself. Back then, when I was bit by a tick at the age of 13, I was a smoker. Even back then, I smoked Camel Turkish Silvers for years, and then I switched to American Spirits because they were the healthier cigarettes. I drank alcohol. I used to love Captain and Coke. Drank Dr. Pepper. I ate fast food. I was actually so hardcore about my fast food that I made sure to go through the McDonald's to get the French fries, and then I would go to the Burger King because I liked the Whopper so much better than the Big Mac. So I definitely used to microwave my food in plastic containers. Yes, this is a no-no, highly toxic. That's a whole nother workshop. But I thought I was doing pretty good, right? I was keeping decent grades. I had to work really hard for them. I had a steady job, but I couldn't keep it for very long. I moved around a lot as well. And I didn't realize at the time that going through half a bottle of Tums a week or having a package of Gas X in my purse, in my locker room, and in my car was not a normal thing. I knew something was off with me, but I didn't know what. And according to the TV commercials, I just had a Gas X, Tums, and Prozac deficiency. Type in chat, can you relate to having a Tums or Prozac deficiency? Just type B if you can relate. Or maybe you're on the opposite end of things, like literally doing everything right and still things aren't working properly. I also get how frustrating that can be. That was me 3 years ago when I finally dug into some of these last pieces in my health journey. I had the diet dialed in. I was in bed every night by 10 p.m., did all the functional things and still would relapse. We'd 3, 6 months, a year would relapse, and then I'd clean myself, get healthy again, and then I would relapse. And it was so frustrating. If you've ever seen any other talks of mine, you'll often hear me say that no matter how common a symptom may be, it is never normal, right? Let that sink in for a little bit. Those headaches that you get on a regular basis, the bloating, the gas, the not being able to sleep at night, you fill in the blank. All of these things are your body's check engine lights saying, hey, there's something going on in here. And all too often we grab for those over-the-counter remedies, right? Which is just like putting a piece of tape over the check engine light, and we keep going along our ways. And then we wonder how years down the road we end up with these autoimmune diseases. And I found, like with myself, a lot of Americans, we start collecting them like trading cards, right? Like it starts with one, and then next thing I knew, another. And then pretty soon we have 3. And I can speak from personal experience. I was just kind of, okay, I just thought that was the norm. And then the norm was this prescription and this medication and these autoimmune diseases for the rest of your life, because they're not telling you that you can actually reverse these things either, which is really frustrating. I haven't figured out how to advance these easier, so I apologize. I don't think that did advance. There we go. Finally, at the age of, where was I? 34. I finally got diagnosed with Lyme disease. Like I said, I was bit by a tick when I was 13. Sadly, I ran into the same issues that I did with doctors that I did before. They just wanted to slap me on a prescription, send me out the door. Not one of them spoke to me about diet, sleep, lifestyle, stress level. Are you pooping daily? Nothing like that. They would look at my labs and tell me, oh, your labs look normal. How many of you had normal labs, right? But you feel anything but normal. And then they started throwing napalm at the Lyme disease. So these hardcore antibiotics, antimalarials, plus herbals, they basically went to war with a person's body who'd been sick for over 2 decades and just started killing stuff off. Like, for the first time in my life, I thought I was going to die. Dr. Rawls says in his book, Unlocking Lyme, that most people think having Lyme is like having a wolf at the door, and then they go to grab a big gun. But Lyme is more like having a cupboard full of rats. And if you take that big gun to the cupboard, you're going to be making a lot of collateral damage. And that's one of the things that when you're just focusing on treatment, that the treatment doesn't address, is all that collateral damage. I felt like they were trying to kill me in the process. That's when I heard the founder of FDN, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. That's my background. His name is Reed Davis. He was speaking on a podcast with Sean Croxton from Underground Wellness. I don't know if any of you remember listening to Sean Croxton back in the day. He wrote an awesome book called The Dark Side of Fat Loss. Totally mind-blowing. But Reed was talking about how you have to, make sure the gut's healed and working properly, make sure your detox pathways are working, make sure your hormones are balanced, right? Like all of these things. And at that time, I was just a silly hairstylist. I didn't have a background in medicine, but intuitively, I knew that made sense to me. That you couldn't stop. You had to. There was a beginning that people focusing on treatment were missing. And that's, I knew that was going to be the answer to my health journey. So like I said, today I've lost over 100 pounds. My husband's lost over 75 pounds in the past 2 years. Do you know how great it feels to be in a body that's not weighed down? I feel comfortable in my skin for the first time in decades. I went from a level 7 pain every day to a level 2, no more suicidal thoughts. Anxiety and depression are gone. No pharmaceutical drugs. I have energy all day to get shit done. I experienced joy and peace in my life for the first time, and no more constipation. I have a great time hanging out with friends and family, because back in the day, the only energy that I had was for work. And then I would come home and crash and burn. My kid didn't have a mother. He had an angry, tired, reactive person who didn't know she was sick. I know some of you don't even have the energy for work. It's just a blessing to get to work and to play, to create a life that I used to just dream about. How many of you would like to have a body and a brain that works and energy to thrive, not just survive? It's truly amazing how much I enjoy life these days. So yeah, after years of hating my body, fluctuating weight gain, losing and gaining the same 65 to 100 pounds back, anxiety, depression, angry outbursts, side effects, being called crazy, and people just thinking that I enjoyed being reactive and moody. The last straw for me came when my husband, it was COVID time, and I was picking on his son. I was being a little reactive, and the last straw, he told me he wasn't going to be married to an angry person anymore. And that's when I said, enough, I'm going to get better. And this is why I talk about this stuff. I want to show you how to get better too. So when I tell my story, my full story to people, it's so crazy to look back and see how far I've come. If I didn't live it, I'm not sure I'd believe it. And it definitely is possible. I now have hope, and I give others hope. I'm not that different from you. I was just, like I said, a silly hairstylist with no medical background who just decided enough is enough. And I wanted to live a pain-free life. Everyone can feel this way. You're not alone, and it's not in your head, which is why I'm so excited to get to our next topic. Stop focusing on treatment, how to overcome Lyme disease, mold toxicity, and autoimmune issues for good. 5 things that are causing your treatment to fail. Number 1, a poor diet, or the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Eating too many inflammatory foods and having a leaky gut. Leaky gut equals leaky brain. So leaky gut, we've got these tight junctions in our gut, right? And they're not really supposed to allow food and viruses, bacteria from our gut into the bloodstream. When it does, our immune system says, hey, apple, you don't belong here. And then it creates an inflammatory response because it sends out the troops, right? We now are attacking apples. And so sadly, the more that you eat a food, the more chances that you are to develop a food sensitivity towards it. The gut and the brain are connected. Over 80% of our happy neurotransmitter serotonin is made in the gut. You can go to therapy, you can get on your prescriptions, and then if you leave the doctor's office and you go pick up a Big Mac and a Coke and you inflame your gut and you inflame your brain, right, that treatment is only going to work like 25% of what it could be. It's crazy too. Everybody used to think that the brain was in control, but every signal that the brain sends to the gut is actually sending 5 signals back. So it's actually our gut that determines how well our brain and our body function. The bad or opportunistic gut bugs thrive on carbs. That's why it's so, I lost my place. Oh, carbs, sugar, and junk. The good guys like a variety of whole, real food, and they help produce our B vitamins, which we need for focus and energy, and our neurotransmitters, like I stated before. It's like a little living garden in our gut, and what we feed them really does matter. You know, garbage in, garbage out. We can't expect to eat processed crap and have vital energy and a sex drive and a brain that works, right? You can't supplement your way out of a diet either. Diet is foundational. If you don't recognize an ingredient, neither does your body. And the immune system will cause inflammation. I know when I started this journey, I had no idea. I went by what I learned on TV, right? Do you remember back in the day when it would say, this is a part of a balanced breakfast? Bullshit. That was diabetes in the making, and is what that was. And don't forget that horrible food pyramid, you know, where like the bottom of it was made up of grains. And we're starting to find out that grains are usually very moldy, full of fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, and are causing a lot of the leaky gut that we have now. So it's not shocking to me that we're having the amount of autoimmune issues that we have when our food pyramid, the bottom rung, started with grains. And it's also kind of sad too, because there's a lot of healthy foods out there that can cause a lot of histamine issues. I absolutely loved Weston A. Price's education, and I started making my own kombucha, and I started making my own ferments and my own sauerkraut, and was thinking I was doing the great thing for my gut, which, don't get me wrong, these foods are amazing. And somebody who doesn't have histamine issues, you got to address those histamine issues first. But the amount of pain and the brain fog that I was in within 2 weeks after consuming all these, you know, quote unquote, healthy foods. So what might be healthy for one isn't necessarily for another. So there's just not a one size fits all when it comes to diet.
Heather, what do you mean by histamine issues? Like, what is that?
Oh, like pain, inflammation, brain fog. Sometimes people have like an allergic histamine reaction, like sneeze, sneeze, sneeze. For me, it was pain. I would easily gain like 7 pounds in a week. And the chronic widespread pain, like you would touch me and it would hurt. And I couldn't get to my brain to work at all. And it was so funny. It took me a couple of weeks to figure that out. But as soon as I did, and I stopped eating the bone broth, stopped taking the ferments, the vinegar, all of it went away. But it shows up differently in a couple different people, but it could show up like an allergic reaction. Like I said, like a histamine response, sneezing, allergies, chronic widespread pain.
Okay.
Other inflammatory foods can be dairy products, grains, inflammatory vegetable oils. You might be hearing a lot these days about inflammatory seed oils and how you are not supposed to be cooking with them, such as canola, corn, sunflower, soy, and even olive oil really shouldn't be cooked with. If you do, you should mix it with butter because it'll make it a more saturated fat, which makes it a little bit more high temp stable. So you don't get that turning it into a trans fat type of thing, and you don't get the inflammation. Personally, I don't ever cook with olive oil. I will only use olive oil to like drizzle on salads or make salad dressings with, or even over food, period, if I just need a little extra fat boost to that food. But I don't ever cook with olive oil. I typically cook with tallow or other healthy animal products, animal fats, or avocado or coconut oil. Vegetable oils can cause cellular inflammation, and inflammation of the cell wall is no good, because if you think about it, if your cell wall is inflamed, nothing good can get in and nothing bad can get out, which then makes us become toxic. And once again, if you do not recognize an ingredient, neither does your body. Grains are showing to be one of like the top 5 factors of autoimmune diseases. Part of it because of the molecular mimicry that goes on with a lot of grains. And so thyroid tissue actually looks a lot like wheat. And there's so many of us out there that have wheat sensitivities now that when we eat wheat, it creates a reaction against our thyroid. But then we have these other cross reactivities that go on, like with corn and dairy and some other grains. So when we eat corn, our body actually thinks it's wheat. It looks like wheat, which then looks like our thyroid, which then contributes to things like Hashimoto's. That was part of the ways that I was able to reverse my Hashimoto's, is when I cut out all grains, dairy, corn, supplemented with a few thyroid healthy supplements. And within, gosh, it was like 4 months, I was able to actually reverse my Hashimoto's. But it's crazy how the immune system of our body has a bit of a memory. And so even I have to be really good, because even like 6 months from now, if I try to eat corn again, it could cause that same reaction. And I prefer just to keep my thyroid working properly. Corn looks like wheat. I know this slide says red meat. I need to find a new slide because I don't necessarily believe that, but it does lead me into a conversation that animals raised in confinement operations are extremely inflammatory, and fat from these animals are where they store toxins, antibiotics, GMO feeds, growth hormones, all stored in the fat of these animals. So you definitely should not consume the fats of those type of animals, and they actually really lower your consumption of that type of meat to begin with. I actually have a couple local farmers that I get my grass fed, pasture raised. I actually know the names of them. But it's a lot healthier meat with some actually anti-inflammatory properties to it. It says sugar and alcohol. Alcohol is a poison to your bodies, folks. I hate to be the Debbie Downer. You can be on the best treatment plan, but if you still continue to drink, you're slowing your process down or even stopping it completely. Actually, I had to cut out alcohol altogether. There's another thing that happens in our brain when we've had traumatic events, mold, concussions, chronic disease, heavy metals. It's called a priming event. And once your microglia or your immune system and your brain have been primed, it's easy to reprime it. And sadly, alcohol is one of those things that can reprime it. So now if I have a drink, it causes inflammation, and that would take like a week to calm that inflammation down. And I would spend all this money and all this time trying to get better just to have 1 or 2 drinks, and I'd be down for a week. And finally, I just decided that wasn't worth it anymore and stopped drinking altogether. And actually, I don't regret it. Once in a blue moon, I might like experience a little FOMO, but for the most part, I don't miss it. Especially not having to worry about what I might have said or done the night before while I was drinking. Now, food sensitivities. Hidden stressors like food sensitivities can cause inflammation on the gut and the brain. Like I said, healthy foods that we think that we're eating on a regular basis could be causing that inflammation. For me, it was apples, pork, I think avocados and black pepper, at the beginning. Or it was even funny, right around 2020, I decided I was going to go on keto again. And a week to 2 weeks into keto, and I've gained 10 pounds, and I'm in even more pain. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I decided to run another food sensitivity panel, and it turned out almonds, avocado, and coconut I was reacting to. And if any of you have ever done a keto or a low carb diet, these have a tendency to be quite the staple in that kind of a diet. So it was no wonder that these, quote unquote, healthy foods that I was eating was causing a lot of havoc in my body. And it also showed me that I had some more work to do around healing my gut. So that way I wasn't reacting to that type of stuff. Now I eat these foods, no problem. I also had a client who came in complaining. She came to me originally for weight loss, but after a week of going on her food sensitivity diet, she told me that her daily migraines went away. And I kind of had to laugh. I'm like, you kind of buried the lead there. Like, I know we talked about weight loss, but how come you didn't tell me that you were dealing with daily migraines? Because she had gotten, it was common to her, so it became normal. She didn't think anything of it until they were actually gone. So when we do food sensitivity testing, a lot of times, they can be the low hanging fruit. That's where I usually start with everybody, is because every brick that you can take off a person's immune system, right, then the body's innate ability to heal can kick in. And so we just call that low hanging fruit. I like to do, it doesn't say, this is a Vibrant lab. So I like doing food sensitivity. I like to do a wheat zoomer, followed with a food sensitivity panel, because most people won't go off of wheat unless I can actually show them how bad it is for them. Because a traditional food sensitivity panel is only testing for a whole protein of the whole food in your system. Well, hopefully you're chewing your food. And so that means that other parts of that protein are going to get into your body. And the wheat zoomer is not just testing the whole protein. It's actually testing the protein, the lectin, the gluten, the couple other different parts of wheat. And so even though you might not be reacting to this part of wheat, you might be reacting to these 3 other parts of wheat that a traditional food sensitivity would miss. And so in order to get compliance, because it's really, really hard to get people to make big lifestyle changes without some like black and white, here's what your body's reacting to. And they have dive deeper into like dairy, eggs, grains. So that's usually, if I've got somebody who can afford them, I'll do the 4 zoomer tests, and then the food sensitivity panel comes with that. So I'll do a wheat, egg, grain. What's the other one? Oh, dairy, because dairy can be a really tough one. Because if you think about it, I don't know if you guys know this, but wheat and dairy actually both have their own form of morphine. And so wheat, it's gliadomorphine, and dairy, it's casomorphine. And so they will actually hit those same opiate receptors in the brain. And it's funny, when I'll run a wheat zoomer, if that pops hot on somebody, and I kind of warn them, I'm like, you're going to kind of struggle for 2 weeks. You're going to actually go through withdrawals because it's hitting that same opiate receptor in our brain. So it's no wonder why people have such a hard time going off of dairy and wheat and giving up pizza or, and other types of pastas that combine the two, because it's addictive. But this can really be a game changer for a lot of folks. I love doing also DNA testing along with the food sensitivity testing, because it actually, when I talked about keto, I actually found through my DNA testing, I should never do a keto type diet, that my body actually doesn't process that high of fat diet very well. And so that was another reason I was gaining weight. And so I'm not meant to be a vegetarian either. So paleo type lifestyle has always been the best for me over the past couple of years. But a lot of times, like I said, that can be low hanging fruit for people, is getting that diet dialed in.
We have a question, Heather. Where do you turn for food sensitivity testing? Do you have a preferred lab that you use?
Yeah, I brought that up. I said Vibrant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Vibrant Labs is the lab, and then the Wheat Zoomer is the name of the actual.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Yep. Number 2, talk about food. Healing trauma, right? Staying in fight or flight keeps us sick. How many of you guys have, learned anything about nervous system regulation or healing fight or flight? Just type me in the chat. I want to know how many folks are actually. It's definitely a hot topic over the past couple of years, especially since COVID. Thank God, because DRNS is amazing. I actually got to meet Dr. Gupta, who made a course a lot like DRNS. I got to meet him just a couple of days ago at a health conference that I was at. That was a huge part, like the last little piece to my puzzle. That's part of the reason why I kept relapsing, right? Like I said, I'm a good functional practitioner. I did all the things, but I never addressed my uncle killing himself when I was 4. I never addressed being raised by addict alcoholics. I never addressed, they talk about big T, little t trauma, and it can be anything from mold, chronic illness, heavy metals, abuse, divorce, military. Lots of things can cause nervous system disruption. A lot of things can cause trauma in the nervous system. But if you don't address that, like I said, you're never going to heal. If your body is stuck in fight or flight and there's always a doctor in the room, you can't heal that way. You have to get into rest and digest and heal in order to have long-lasting health. And so, like I said, that's where I was getting into trouble, is because I would focus on all the physical stuff, but none of the emotional stuff, the nervous system stuff, and then I would relapse. Anything from somatic experiencing work, breath work, tapping, DRNS, Gupta, I think, what else have I done? Body energy work. That's where I became a bioenergetic practitioner. I'm doing body code and emotion code right now, which has been hugely helpful, because I find that going back into somebody's story can be really triggering. And so a lot of these things bypass having to either A, remember what traumatized you to begin with, and B, having to get re-traumatized by talking about it. So I think that's incredible body of work that's been emerging. It started off with me reading The Body Keeps Score. How many of you have read that book? Anywho, if you haven't, I highly recommend it. I was ugly crying on the couch as I was reading it. And my husband's like, "What are you reading?" And I'm like, "This little girl and her dad." And he's like, no, I don't want to hear anymore. But he really opened it up to tying it all together, and then had some really great recommendations on how to overcome a lot of these traumas. Everything from all neurofeedback is another beautiful way to help with this as well. And number 3, toxins and parasites. I had so many other toxins and parasites that treatment was not addressing. More and more levers that needed to be peeled back in order for my gut to heal. I talked about DNA testing. My toxic bucket, my detox bucket, is very small. And so it doesn't take much for it to overflow. That's why staying in that moldy room didn't bother my husband, but it totally kicked my butt, because he's got a lot bigger detox bucket than I do. Start looking environment, other hidden stressors on the body. I had to, I said I was a hairstylist for 15 years beforehand, working around all those nasty chemicals. I was a girly girl. I loved perfume and scented hairspray and scented body lotion and all that stuff. I had to get rid of all of it to help detox my body and my environment. And it was funny, because when I first started this, thank God for the FDN, because I did a lot like a lot of folks do, as they'll get a book and it leads them down another book and it leads them down another, or a webinar or a podcast. But there was no one there to kind of help me put all the pieces together to my puzzle. And that's what a program like FDN does. It helps you to see the whole picture. Because like I said, if you've got all the best treatments and maybe you're doing a little bit of nervous system stuff, but you're living in mold, right? Or you're wearing perfume or those Glade scented plugins, it's another barrier to health that you're overlooking. I would have kept at this on my own, throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. Where I'd be, I know all these years of trial and error I was doing on my own, I got this down to 3 to 6 months. And when I started working with a coach like myself, what do we got? This slide just shows all the different ways that toxins can infect the body: migraines, headaches, heart palpitations, anxiety, mood swings, insomnia, lack of energy, depression, brain fog, can't concentrate. When our detox buckets get overfilled, that's when our symptoms come on and leave us more susceptible for getting autoimmune and other chronic illnesses. On the toxin list, I'm also going to add cavitations and root canals. When I start working with anybody, the top 3 things I rule out: cavitations, living in mold, and sleep apnea. Because if you're not getting enough oxygen at night when you sleep, all the best protocol in the world's, like I said, not going to live up to its full benefit. So these can be some of the three biggest barriers to actual health.
How do you know if you're living in mold? Like, is there a test that you get done, or just your symptoms tell you that?
Both. So you can test yourself, you can test your environment. I highly recommend sometimes testing both. A lot of times you can actually see the visible mold. Like that hotel room that I was in, I could smell it when I walked in. And if you can smell it, it's mold. Most people just think, oh, it's mildewy or it's a little musty. No, that's actually the smell of mold. And I could actually see visible mold on the grout in the bathroom because the exhaust fan wasn't working. I actually think there might be a little problem downstairs in the house that I'm living in now. And so I'm actually getting ready to test myself. And there's a couple cool new labs out. One of them is called Got Mold. I actually have their information on the resource section on my webpage. But it's an at-home test that's actually pretty accurate. They're getting better and better these days because it's there's been a lot of controversy over mold testing, mold remediation. There's a lot of shysters doing some really crappy work, and it's leaving people really, really sick still. So it's a huge area that I talk about with my clients because, like I said, it can be a huge barrier to health. Another form of toxins is the dirty dozen. You know, sometimes I know a lot of our clients in the beginning or ourselves can't afford to eat 100% organic. But if you can go on the EWG, the Environmental Working Group website, and look up, these are the foods that are highest in pesticides. And if you can only afford to do a certain amount organic, always do these organic. I thought I had another in here on mold, but I guess I missed it. What was I going to say? See, that freaking mold, I swear. That's no joke. I've been pounding the binders back like no tomorrow, and my brain's starting to come back to me, but I'm definitely
And by binders, you mean like activated charcoal or something?
correct. I like to use a lot of Salcor binders because you can actually take them with food and or other supplements. You don't have to take them 2 hours away from other things, which makes it a lot easier for compliance. But stuff like sweating, saunas, dry brushing, coffee enemas are also really great ways to help unload that detox bucket and help with the mold as well. Number 4, mindsets. Do you believe you can get better? That's actually a question on my intake form because you would not believe how many times people would answer it, no, or I'm not sure. And, you know, one of the biggest blocks I've seen in some folks is their beliefs of whether they can get better or not. You know, I'm not talking about toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. I want you to feel your feelings. Just don't live there. You know, grieve your kid, your crappy childhood because you, or your kid's crappy childhood because you couldn't be the parent that they needed because you were sick. You know, get angry over the bullshit that we've gone through to get better, or feel frustrated because, you know, being gaslighted by the traditional medical community. Feel your feelings. Just don't live there. Let them move through you. Have you ever seen a toddler, right, have a full-on meltdown, and then within 2 minutes, they're back up to playing like nothing happened? Or like ducks, you know, you'll see them kind of get in a little squirmish, and then one of them will swim away, and then they start to shake, and then they're fine. It's because they've let that emotion move through them instead of stuffing it, getting it stuck and having it fester and show up as autoimmune or other types of diseases or even pain. Don't let them get stuck and fester. The power of the mind has been such a beautiful thing. And it's another huge area. You know, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, there's so many thought leaders that talked about this, but they will actually hook up athletes to brain electrodes to record how the same areas in their brain are firing up, whether they're physically going through an exercise or if they're going through it just in their mind. Or have you ever thought a naughty thought, right? Something that turns you on. Tell me you're not having a physical response to what you're thinking. Like, our brain makes up so much of our healing, and it's not being taken into consideration a lot when we focus on treatment only. I know it's not easy to do when you feel like crap. But you have to start. It is a part of the healing prescription. Oh, there was a thing in here on mold. I knew I had a mold thing. I'm finding such a huge correlation with folks with Lyme and mold. Most of it is due to our genetics. Actually, there's mutations in our genetics don't allow us to detox mold properly. That's me. So like I said, my husband, he does just fine, but in me, in a normal body, if you get exposed to mold, your immune system goes in, tags it as not supposed to being there, and then your body ushers it out. Someone like me, it does not. It just continues to circulate, cause inflammation, cause inflammation, cause inflammation. It's a huge stressor on the nervous system too. Mold is one of the most notorious for turning that nervous system on, fight or flight, fire. But then you can move out of the mold and nobody turned off the alarm system, and that's your nervous system still ringing those bells, fire, fighter. So folks, especially who've got mold toxicity, really need to think about doing that nervous system retraining. And it's sad because I get a lot of people who want to continue to try to live in their house and ask if they will heal. But one of my dear friends from Vibrant Labs, Dr. Kim Bruno, she had the wonderful analogy of it's like trying to brush your teeth and eat Oreos at the same time. So sadly, most of us, you're not going to heal completely if you're continuing to live or work in a moldy environment. There are things you can do to feel better now. Number one, get moving outside, 20 minutes a day walk. It's amazing the science that shows just getting the fresh air, the vitamin D on your face, the movement, get your lymph moving, helps detox, something as little as 20 minutes a day. Get started. Even if it's just 5 minutes a day, get started. Test, don't guess. So that food sensitivity stuff, is it heavy metals? A lot of times I like to do stool analysis to find out exactly what gut bugs that we're dealing with. Is it so much that you have an overgrowth of just all bad stuff, or maybe you just don't have enough of the good guys, fighting the good fight, and maybe we just need to add that. Cut out inflammatory foods, dairy, grains, corn, processed foods, sugar, vegetable oil. Cut out alcohol. Get your feet on the ground. There's also a ton of research on how getting rid of those like EMFs that we get from sitting in front of the computer, going outside and hooking back into our battery, Mother Earth, how that will help with actually inflammation. I had my stepson years after I was picking on him, we had a much better relationship, but he was like crawling, typical angsty teenager crawling out of his skin. He had like a bunch of attitude. I told him, go outside and sit out there with your socks off until you start to feel better. And he fought me on it, and then he finally did it. And when he came back inside, he was a completely different kid. Like, it was kind of amazing to watch. Eat organic when you can, or at least cut out the dirty dozen. Number 7, eat more real food. How many of you do you think you can start implementing some of these things in your life now, right? Pretty easy stuff. Results are life-changing and typical. I have found people have suffered long enough, act now, feel better. Make sure to have a wonderful, healthy day. And part of my thank you gift is I'm got 15% off my normal pricing to coach with me. So do we have time for questions?
Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions?
Good. I do.
Mold sniffing dogs. That's awesome.
Hi.
Hello.
I have a consult with you tomorrow, so I love everything I'm hearing here. I was just diagnosed with, well, it's a little bit of Lyme, but Babesia and Bartonella. So I'm assuming that you treat that as well because they're so related.
FDNs don't actually diagnose or treat anything. We really do focus on the foundations, because once our body's foundation can get better, it's amazing. Once I put all this other stuff into play, I didn't actually have to go retreat for Lyme. I didn't have to retreat for a lot of these other critters because my body was actually able to kick in the immune system and do its job. Although, with that being said, there are a couple different herbal protocols that I work with and energy work that I work with that helps with Lyme, co-infections, that sort of stuff, because sometimes a person just does need a little extra boost, but that's usually at the very end of the line. That's usually not where we start.
Sure.
Because again, it can make a person really, really sick.
Yeah. Yeah. So is your opinion that the body can heal itself of things like tick-borne illness and Lyme without having to go through some of the antibiotics and et cetera?
Absolutely. I actually think that there's a lot of folks that don't need it. You know, Dr. Rawls is a huge proponent. If you ever follow any of his stuff, he's a doctor who has kind of turned functional medicine, and he's all about the herbs when it comes to dealing with Lyme and mold. You know, I think it just, you know, every case is so different. And certainly antibiotics have their place, especially for someone who just gets bit, you know, and they get on around to doxy for 6 to 8 weeks. Like what a blessing that is, that they never have to really deal with long-term or chronic Lyme. But yeah, I do think that our bodies need a little bit more help these days, because we've gotten too far off track of what it takes for humans to be healthy. You know, we can't get away from the EMFs completely. We can't get away from the toxins that are in our air, in our food, in the vaccines, you know, so we've got a lot against us. And I think that's why we're needing more help these days. That's why a lot of these bacteria and viruses are more virulent than they've ever been as well. And so it's a combo of both. But I think when you can remove as much of the barriers as you can, humanly possible, it's definitely possible.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You can't, I mean, Tammy, if you are a practitioner, you have to set up an account with Vibrant Health. You can only get those labs through a practitioner. It's not something that you can get on your own. But they're called, so a gut zoomer is for like a stool test, or a wheat zoomer, or a dairy zoomer, corn zoomer. I've, not a healing zoomer. That's not a thing, but yeah, you have to be. The Dark Side of Fat Loss is Sean Cruxton. Awesome book. He was a physical therapist, right? Calories in, calories out. And he turned the whole thing upside down and went, wait, there's way more to fat loss than just calories in, calories out.
There's another one about, do you take or have you taken any brain boosting supplements?
Oh yeah. My brain stuff has always been my biggest side effects, especially the cognitive stuff. So I love taking high doses of fermented cod liver oil. I love taking adaptogenics. I love taking all the different types of mushrooms out there that are great for the brain. Making sure to get enough healthy fats. Slowing down, right? When you run into brain fog, a lot of brain fog, especially due to trauma, you know, really the only thing that can get you out of that is just time and slowing down. And so taking naps, you know, taking warm Epsom salt baths, you know, doing things to, again, get your nervous system calm down so that your brain can come back online. But yeah, I love biohacking. I actually got to meet Dave Afspray from Bulletproof Coffee this last week too, and he's, you know, a huge biohacker. Got his last he's got a new coffee line out called Danger Coffee, but it's supposed to be completely mold and pesticide free. Man, the flavor of it was amazing, and I'm excited because, again, coffee, especially coffee and peanuts, are two of the moldiest foods and grains out there. So if you're sensitive to mold and you're trying to, so again, a lot of times we'll focus on like our environment, but then we're continuing to eat foods that are higher in mold, and we're wondering why we're not getting better. So that's why a lot of times it helps to work with a practitioner who's kind of been there, done that, to help, you know, take an outside perspective and looking at all these pieces of where you might be missing your pieces.
I know there are a lot of nootropics that are out there.
Yeah.
Have you tried any of those at all? Because I've like started taking Qualia Mind, for example. I know David Asprey something about that.
Yeah, I love all his stuff, and I've been doing Bulletproof Coffee for a long time. The MCC oil is great because, like I said, my biggest fear there was a documentary that showed Alzheimer's brains, and like 80% of them had Lyme disease. And watching my cognitive fall at such an early age. Like it literally scared the crap out of me that I was going to lose my brain. And so I'm always, so part of it too was, removing heavy metals from my life, aluminum, not cooking with aluminum, not using aluminum deodorant, not using aluminum foil, not drinking, so even for the longest time I was drinking, so I stopped drinking soda, but I'm drinking LaCroix, right? But out of aluminum. And so instead I've actually took it one step further and got a soda stream and then made my own flavors. But you can get some of those cool flavors too that are made with stevia, but just removing a lot of these things. The cavitations were a huge part of it too, because when you have an infection in your jaw that's so close to your brain, like the week before I went in for surgery, I was stuttering, I was losing words. I would walk into a room and completely forget who I was, where I was going. Like it was scary at such a young age. So yeah, I love all the biohacking stuff, the neurotropics, like all of it. Kelly, I've been an FDN since 2013. So I was kind of an OG. I think there was only like 2 other graduating classes before myself. And it's a completely different course now than it was then. And if you want to talk about that, I would love to chat with you about FDN, outside of here, but it's a phenomenal program.
What do you suggest for, we talked about parasite cleansing. So is there a certain like protocol that you do, or is it like
I really love using Cellcore's product because, who was her name? She had commented earlier, Christy. They really have thought of all the stages and in what order you should address things. Because like I said, that was a huge part to my healing. I had heavy metals, I had parasites along with the Lyme, and really those should be addressed first. And so Cellcore, actually their protocol, it's a 9-month protocol. But it's a step-by-step protocol. And so like the first month is all about drainage and making sure that your detox pathways are open up. And then month 2 is digging deeper into like candida and gut health and like parasites, heavy metals. And then by the time at the end, now you're dealing with herbs to deal with Lyme and co-infections. And there's a protocol for mold in there as well. So it's such a beautifully put together. So I use a lot of Cellcore mixed with bioenergetic work. So this is a frequency generating machine that helps balance the biofield, calm the nervous system. It's got a frequencies for Lyme and mold. And then I also like to use Des Bio, which is a homeopathics. Like this morning before I got on, like believe it or not, I only had a couple little stutters where my brain stopped, but Des Bio has this, it's called Dynamic Brain. I got it from them at this conference that I was just at, and I can't even get over how quickly I take it, and it's like, ooh, focus. And actually with homeopathics, you can take it every 10 minutes. So if I wasn't on camera, I might have actually been, trying to like, dose with a little bit of that to kind of help get my brain going. But luckily I didn't have very many freezes. Like I said, it's been doing so much better today. And I will never, ever, ever, if I know there's mold in a room, I don't care. I'm going to be that pain in the ass and be like, I'm sorry, but you need to find me a new room. You've got to be your own health advocate.
That's really cool. So how do we contact you? I know you went over it, but how do we, if anybody wants to work with you or contact you after, is it best just to go to your website? And you also have like a class, right? A cooking class that you offer?
I do. So, and Lauren, that's a great question. And it's not something to consider all at once. Like I tell people, give yourself a year, right, to make a lot of these changes, because every small step that you make is going to add up to big lifetime wins. This is a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. We're trying to have lifetime health. So it does get overwhelming if you're trying to look at the whole thing all at once. And I tell you, don't do it. Even if you're just like focusing on removing toxins from your environment, what's one thing that you can do to trade up? So you run out of your regular deodorant, next time buy one that's aluminum free, right? When this pan breaks, no, I take that back. You should replace that even sooner. Don't wait for it to break. Get rid of all the non-stick aluminum. But it's one step at a time. And yes, people can get a hold of me. I have a free cooking series on my website. Real Cooking for Real Life, because that's where I see a lot of people get hangups of how do I make healthy, delicious meals fast, and I teach you. And then I actually have a whole free course on how I healed from Lyme disease, mold toxicity, and reversed 2 out of 3 of my autoimmune diseases on the front page of my website. So a lot of great free resources. And then also, if you need a little bit more accountability, a little bit more personalized approach, then we can talk more about what it looks like to coach. But the lymeboss.com, LYME, not LIME.